A 55-year banned episode, erased from history, now resurfaces with a shocking truth. The Twilight Zone. Do you remember it? Those quiet nights, sitting in front of a black and white screen. When Rod Serling's warm, resonant voice guided us into a strange world where the boundary between reality and dreams grew fragile, where anything could happen. Picture this, friends, one episode, just a single fleeting episode, locked away in darkness for 55 years. It was wiped clean from television history, as if it never existed. Why? What made a mere 25-minute story so dangerous, so sensitive, that no one was allowed to see it? Are you curious? I know I am. And today, we'll uncover the secret behind The Encounter, an episode of The Twilight Zone that doesn't just speak of the past, but reflects the struggles we still face in our world today. How old are you now? Were you, like me, once glued to The Twilight Zone with your family, back when the world seemed simpler, yet haunted by invisible fears? Did you ever shiver at those unexpected endings, or shed tears over stories that touched the deepest corners of your heart? Share with me in the comments your memories of this show. Is there an episode you can't forget? A moment that made you pause, reflect, or even see the world differently? When The Twilight Zone premiered on CBS on October 2, 1959, it was unlike anything else on television. No fixed cast, no ongoing storyline. Each week, we were ushered into a new story, a new world, with new characters and questions that made our hearts race. Rod Serling, who wrote 92 of the 156 episodes, became our guide. Do you remember? There he stood, in his elegant suit, a cigarette in hand, telling us we were entering the Twilight Zone. His voice, calm yet haunting, was like a warning that what we were about to witness wouldn't be easily forgotten. What made The Twilight Zone special wasn't just its science fiction or horror. Beneath the aliens, time machines, and monsters were mirrors reflecting society. This was the late 1950s and early 1960s, a time when America basked in post-World War II prosperity but was haunted by deep fears: nuclear bombs, communism, and societal unrest. Rod Serling, a World War II veteran who had seen the brutality of war, didn't want to tell stories that let us escape reality. He wanted us to confront it, our fears, not just from the outside, but from within. Have you ever wondered why a sci-fi show could touch the hearts of millions? From kids in the 60s to people like us today? It's because Serling used fiction to talk about things that couldn't be said directly. An episode about aliens might be about racism. A time travel story might warn of war. Do you remember Time Enough at Last? The book-loving man, played by Burgess Meredith, survives a nuclear blast only to find he can't read because his glasses are shattered. His cry of "It's not fair" echoes like humanity's desperate wail over irreparable loss, or The Shelter, where friendly neighbors turn on each other over a nuclear threat. These weren't just fantasies. They were warnings. Questions Serling posed. What kind of world are we building? Who gets to live in it, and who gets erased? But then, one episode went too far, crossing an invisible line set by the censors. It was called The Encounter, aired only once on May 1, 1964, and then it vanished. Are you curious? Why was this episode banned for over half a century? What made it so dangerous it had to be erased from television history? Join me as we step into this story, and I promise you won't be able to look away from what's about to be revealed. The Encounter is a unique episode, a bottle episode, filmed in a single location with minimal characters, often to save production costs. But don't let its simplicity fool you. In that small attic, a powerful emotional story unfolds. Two main characters, two fates, two people trapped not just in a space, but in the shadows of their past, in wounds that never healed. Fenton, played by Neville Brand, is a World War II veteran. He carries the pain and instability of what he did in the war. He's no hero, but a man haunted by guilt, torn by memories of blood and death. Opposite him is Arthur, or Taro, a Japanese-American played by George Takei. Arthur grew up with the trauma of his family being interned in camps during World War II, solely because of their heritage. He carries bitterness, anger, and confusion about his own identity. Imagine it. Friends. A small attic where two strangers meet. Fenton is sorting through old belongings and finds a samurai sword, a war trophy, a relic of his actions. Arthur enters, looking for work, and their conversation starts off friendly. Fenton offers Arthur a beer, and they chat like old pals. But then the air shifts. Fenton begins recounting his days of killing in the war, how he killed Japanese soldiers, how he took that sword. Arthur tries to keep the peace, but his eyes linger on the sword too long. Something's wrong, like a storm quietly brewing. And then, Arthur drops a bombshell. He reveals his real name is Taro and claims his father, according to him, was a spy for Japan, linked to the Pearl Harbor attack. Can you feel it? The air in that room, it becomes suffocating, as if there's no oxygen left. Fenton grows paranoid, suspecting Arthur is there for revenge. Arthur, with haunted eyes, speaks of the sword as if it has a soul, thirsting for blood. No monsters, no demons, just two men, imprisoned by pain, hatred, and memories that can't be erased. Why was this episode banned? Can you guess? When the encounter aired in 1964, it sparked outrage. Some viewers, especially the Asian American community, felt that portraying Arthur's father as a traitor was offensive and dangerous. Put yourself in 1964's context. America hadn't yet faced one of its darkest chapters, the internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. These weren't enemies. They were American citizens, families, shopkeepers, children, teachers, imprisoned solely for their ancestry. No evidence, no trials, just fear and prejudice. The U.S. government, at the time, hadn't admitted its mistake. The internment was justified as national security, but in reality, there was no proof of treason or espionage from this community. In that climate, an episode suggesting a Japanese American's father was a spy was deemed too sensitive, too dangerous. Sponsors threatened to pull out. Viewers sent complaints, calling the episode racist, anti-American, or simply too intense for prime time. CBS, fearing the loss of viewers and funding, withdrew the episode from circulation. But here's what the censors didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to. The encounter isn't just about racism. It's about complicity, about war's unhealed wounds, about how the past continues to haunt us. Fenton isn't a hero. He's an unstable man who may have killed an unarmed soldier in the war and taken the sword as a trophy. He's haunted by guilt, not just for what he did, but for what the war turned him into. Arthur, or Taro, isn't a pure victim either. He carries bitterness, anger, and perhaps confusion about his identity. When he says his father was a spy, we don't know if it's true or something he was taught to believe. Is he confronting Fenton with truth or with a metaphor? A way to express the pain of growing up in a country that interned his family, called him an enemy, then told him to be grateful. Even the samurai sword, the story's centerpiece, is symbolic. Arthur says it has a soul, that it craves blood. Is it a supernatural force or a symbol of violence, of trauma passed down through generations? The encounter offers no clear answers. It has no heroes or villains, just two men, trapped in a room, trapped in history, trapped in their own hearts. And that, friends, is why it was banned. In an era when television preferred clear-cut stories with tidy endings. The encounter refused that. It forced viewers to face complexity, the gray areas of morality, questions with no easy answers. CBS, fearing backlash from viewers and sponsors, pulled it from circulation. It vanished from reruns, DVDs, and public memory for decades. The encounter became a legend. Some fans traded grainy VHS copies. Others believed it was destroyed. Some thought the controversy was exaggerated. But the story doesn't end there. Did you know? After 55 years in obscurity, the encounter returned in 2016. The Sci-Fi Channel, now Sci-Fi, made a surprising announcement. They would air the episode, unedited, uncut, as if it had never been erased. It aired during a Twilight Zone marathon on New Year's Eve, and the audience response was staggering. Longtime fans were stunned. Younger viewers, many unaware of the episode, were shocked by its power and honesty. Some praised its truthfulness, others still found it uncomfortable, but nearly all agreed. This was one of the most powerful stories the Twilight Zone ever told. And now, in 2025, the encounter is widely available. Why now, after over half a century? Is it allowed to return? The answer lies not just in a TV episode, but in history, in memory, and in the long fight to bring uncomfortable truths to light. Let's explore why. Friends? The encounter isn't just a story from 1964. It's a reminder of what we still face today. Do you remember George Takei, who played Arthur? He's not just an actor. He's a survivor. As a child, his family was sent to the Roher internment camp in Arkansas, one of 10 camps set up by the U.S. government after Pearl Harbor. They committed no crime. They faced no trial. They were imprisoned solely for being Japanese American. George Takei, then just 5, recalls soldiers pointing guns at him. He remembers his father trying to shield him from that painful truth. When George Takei performed in The Encounter, he wasn't just acting. He brought his life into the role. Arthur, with his bitter words about his father, embodies the pain of thousands of Japanese Americans, and Fenton, with his paranoia and guilt, represents an America unable to face itself. The attic where they confront each other becomes a symbol of a national attic, where we store memories, pain, and things we don't want to face. Think about today's world. Friends, in recent years, we've seen a rise in attacks on Asian Americans, especially during the pandemic. People have been insulted, assaulted, just for how they look. Phrases like "go back to China" still echo, as if the past taught us nothing. In this context, the encounter isn't outdated. It's a warning, a call to look at unhealed wounds. The samurai sword in the episode. Do you think it's just an object? No. It's a symbol of trauma passed from generation to generation. Fenton and Arthur, both bound by that sword, by history, by what war left behind. And the attic becomes a kind of purgatory, where guilt, grief, and vengeance swirl endlessly. But the encounter isn't the only banned episode. Did you know? 4 other Twilight Zone episodes were also pulled from circulation, each for different reasons, but all revealing a truth. Not every story is allowed to be told. Let me tell you about them. First is Miniature, aired in 1963, starring Robert Duvall. It's about a lonely man obsessed with a dollhouse in a museum, believing the figures inside are real. A gentle, poetic story about isolation. It was pulled due to a copyright dispute. The family of writer Charles Beaumont claimed CBS lacked long-term broadcast rights. As a result, Miniature vanished for decades, only restored in the early 2000s on DVD. Next is A Short Drink from a Certain Fountain, aired in December 1963. It follows a middle-aged man pressured by his young wife to use a youth serum. The serum works too well, turning him into a child, leaving his wife in an awkward situation. This episode was pulled over plagiarism concerns, though details remain vague. To avoid legal trouble, CBS removed it from reruns. Then there's Sounds and Silences, about a man obsessed with noise, driven mad when sounds become overwhelming. It was pulled after a former sailor sued CBS, claiming the story was based on his life and defamed him. To avoid further issues, the episode was shelved, only restored years later on home media. Finally, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, a unique episode not produced by Serling's team. It's a French short film based on Ambrose Bierce's story, purchased by CBS for a single airing in 1964. It follows a Confederate supporter sentenced to hang but seemingly escapes, only to realize it's a hallucination in his final moments, despite winning an Oscar for Best Short Film. It aired once due to copyright limits, and many fans didn't even know it existed. These episodes weren't banned for being poor. They were banned because they were too real, too close to fears society didn't want to face. Rod Serling once said his work was the art of self-censorship. He disguised social critiques on racism, fascism, fear of the other in sci-fi to slip past censors. But even then, he couldn't protect all his work. Think about this. Friends. Who decides which stories get told? Who decides which get buried? That's the question the Twilight Zone asks. And it's still relevant today. In an age of streaming platforms and censorship debates, we're still fighting to preserve complex, uncomfortable stories. I want to share some stories from Twilight Zone fans, from comments I've read. One person, growing up in the 70s, said the Twilight Zone wasn't just a show, it was a reality. They felt they lived in a world Serling predicted. Another shared about Changing of the Guard, where a teacher, played by Donald Pleasance, thinks he's left no legacy, only to be reminded by deceased students that he taught them courage, compassion, and sacrifice. That person said they cried watching it. Another mentioned Time Enough at Last, with its "It's not fair" cry when the protagonist loses everything, or To Serve Man, with the shocking twist that the Aliens book isn't about serving humanity, but is a cookbook. Did you laugh remembering that? Someone else spoke of The Howling Man, which terrified them as a child, or The Lonely and The Rip Van Winkle Caper, stories that left deep marks. One fan recalled The Grave, with stellar actors like Lee Marvin and Lee Van Cleef, or an episode with Robert Redford, where an old woman fears death, only to realize death, in the form of a young man, isn't as scary as she thought. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're lessons, mirrors, reminders of humanity and the world we live in. The Twilight Zone isn't just a TV show. It's a teacher, a friend, a mirror. It teaches us that fear doesn't just come from outside, but from within. Rod Serling, with his timeless genius, created a legacy that never fades. He used sci-fi to address issues no one dared tackle directly: racism, war, power, morality. One fan shared that their father, a veteran of the 11th Airborne Division, knew Rod Serling during World War II. When The Twilight Zone aired, the family had to be silent to hear Serling speak. That father, like Serling, died young from illness, partly due to his time in Japan post-war. This story makes me think of Serling, not just a storyteller, but someone who lived the pain he wrote about. Friends, when I think of The Encounter, I think of all of us, the stories we tell, the ones we choose to forget, the wounds we carry, the hopes we place in the future. This episode, banned for over half a century, returned to remind us that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, must be faced. Consider this. In today's world, we still grapple with issues: the Twilight Zone, raised, injustice, fear, and who gets to tell their story. The Encounter isn't just an episode. It's a call to look at ourselves, at what we've done, and what we can do to heal. Before I close, I'll ask again. Do you remember The Twilight Zone? Was there a moment in the show that made you pause, reflect, or change how you see the world? An episode that made you laugh, cry, or shudder? Leave a comment, share your story. And if you loved this journey, hit the like button, subscribe, and join me to explore more stories. Thank you, dear friends, for stepping into The Twilight Zone with me. Hold on to those memories. Keep telling the stories worth hearing. And remember, in a turbulent world, stories like these are the light that guides us. See you again in another dimension.